And my lab works on robot learning. We do mostly reinforcement learning, other learning algorithms, and robotics. Today I'm going to talk about something very specific. It's a very large research project that we've been working on and we're going to work on for some time. It's about AI-based tactile imaging. And it's a kind of a medical-oriented project. I'll tell you all about it. Right? So palpation is the use of touch in medical examination. It has many uses in medicine, and one of the most well-known ones is in breast cancer detection. So,
Okay, back here. Second.
So, many cases, I'm not going to go into the numbers, but many cases are discovered by palpation, either by self-palpation or by a physician. And well, if you talk to doctors, each one will tell you a different number and how important it is. But our hypothesis is that touch contains some useful clinical information in breast cancer detection and in many other cases. And the problem is that currently there is no quantitative evaluation of touch. There is no device that touches human tissue and reconstructs the inner structure of the body. And we think that if we had such a device, an artificial palpation device, then, for example, it could be more accurate than human, and it could detect changes in time. Well, we humans, we don't remember what we touched 10 or 20 minutes ago, definitely not a patient from several months ago. A device that can actually give you some imaging that you can take home and compare with might be very beneficial. So this is the motivation. And you all know that AI has, allowed us to understand most of our senses. So we can understand vision, we can understand auditory signals, we can even understand data that we can sense, like MRI images and X-ray images. But touch has remained somewhat elusive. So it's very difficult to understand a scene from touch, tactile signals. There is a lot of hardware, so it's not difficult to come out to get some advanced tactile sensors. For example, this is the zero use scheme that we have in our lab, or the digit is based on vision, and there are many different variations of that. The problem is that understanding or interpreting these signals into understanding is difficult. So currently, the state of the art is kind of old school techniques that kind of average a signal or do some standard signal processing. This is a medical device from about 15 years ago. There's actually a company that uses these, but it's not great in terms of accuracy, not good enough to actually be useful. And our motivation is that by using AI, we can get much more accurate tactile imaging. So the motivation comes from humans. We learn touch. Well, physicians don't learn palpation in medical school. They learn it in kindergarten when we play with things. That's when we learn to interpret complex patterns in the tactile data and reconstruct them into some image of the world. And we wanted to kind of replicate that. So our idea was that we're going to learn from self-play, called self-supervised learning, if you're familiar with that. And for that, we needed some data. We needed data for playing with soft objects and understanding what we're touching. There's no data in the internet. In contrast, for example, to vision and audio, there is no online database of touch. Definitely not for soft objects. So we have to make some ourselves. So this is one so-called modular breast content that we developed in our lab, made of soft silicone and hydrogel, like slime that children pillows. Basically, some kind of squishy top. It's not anatomical in any way. This is not an anatomical breast content, but it is relatively in the softness that's relevant for human tissue. And it has inside it some slightly harder structures made also from soft silicone. And our idea that if we can understand from touch the inner structure of this object, it will get us somewhere. And here's a video kind of demonstrates how soft it is. This is one of the tactile sensors. Think of it like big thumb that it has different or 30 something like pixels, what's called pixels on the thumb. Then it touches this object, and from these measurements, about 100 times a second, we need to understand what is inside the object. We collected a lot of data like this. It's an automatic setup that has different inserts inside these phantoms, and overall we collected several hundred hours of tactile data. By far the largest data set today, several orders of magnitude larger than anything that we had before. And then we needed to make sense of this data. And the idea is to treat it kind of like the way that large language models process text, right? So what is tactile sequence? We have a sequence of the robot touching the object at different positions. We have the position of the robot touching the object, and we have the tactile reading, a vector of, say, 9 numbers. What does an LLM do? An LLM processes part of the sentence and tries to predict the next word in the sentence. And if you do this over a lot of data, the model learns the patterns inside the sentence that is relevant for predicting the next token, right? And that is just for this prediction problem, it learns about language, it learns about cities, it learns about geography, and a lot of other stuff that you all know. In our setting, we have a neural network that takes as input a part of a tactile sequence. It codes it into some vector of representation, just vector of numbers. And then we have another neural network that takes this vector and some given pose, for example, in the future of the tactile sequence, and we ask it to predict what would be the tactile reading in that pose. So intuitively, if you can predict how the object would feel if you touched it at a particular point, you've understood the inner structure of the object. So this is the idea, and we can use this algorithm just on a very large amount of data that we collected just by random play. And it learns, the very delicate patterns in the tactile data that corresponds to something. We don't know exactly what, but it uses these representations, it learns the representations that tell something about the structure. Then we wanted to relate this to the actual structure of the object. So we took these objects, we scanned them in an MRI machine. Technion has an MRI center. And these objects are made of hydrogel and silicone that's very easy to image. So we have these three-dimensional objects. And then we train another model that reconstructs the 3D structure from the representation. And here's how it looks like. So this is the robot touching the object. This is the ground structure from the MRI. And this is our prediction. So you see that in the beginning, it's going to be very long. And then we collect more and more data. The presentation gets more and more accurate. And it predicts a millimeter accurate inner structure. So this is the first, to my knowledge, the first AI-based tactile imaging system. We also wanted to know, is it as good as humans, worse, better? So we did a very simple experiment. We need to do more experiments, but this is a very simple one we did. We took participants, untrained participants, basically students in our lab. We gave them this object, they could touch it, and then after 10 minutes, we either let them touch the same object or one with an insert that has a slightly larger inclusion. And we asked them to answer, did the inclusion grow or not? And our object is actually a slightly older model, even did better than humans. Right? So we think there is some signal here that we can get to superhuman tactile understanding. Right. So now I'll use my phone. Right. In a recent project, we also made a handheld device. So this is something like an ultrasound probe. It's just a probe that you can touch something soft, and it gives you an image of the inner structure of what you're touching. So right now, this is the basis for a medical device that we can use to actually use this in clinical trials. So where is this going, and how does this relate to the bigger picture in my head, right? We think that this could be useful as a clinical device, and we want to move on to clinical trials. In breast cancer, for example, we think that we can detect changes in the shape of, for example, the lobes in the breast over time, and we think that that could be a useful signal for early detection. The main point is that for this to actually work on human data, we need a lot more data. We need to train on many variants of artificial phantoms, maybe fine-tune it on clinical data, maybe some simulated data. Take all of this data together and obtain some model that actually is relevant for clinical decision making. We have some signal that is actually food work. So this is a very interesting result. So we have, there's a self-supervised learning, just the robot just touching the object without any ground truth data. Is that actually useful that the robot learn intricate patterns in the data or not? We did this by multiplying the self-supervised data, this is the block here, or multiplying the label data, the MRI images. You think that MRI images are more useful because they contain a lot more data about actual objects, but it turned out that just multiplying the self-supervised data was even more useful. So it does actually learn delicate patterns in the data, and we think this is a signal for using this for much more general problems. Breast cancer is only one example. I've been talking to doctors. We have some collaboration in abdomen palpation and in shoulder surgery. And I think that there might be many more applications of this technology. I think that what I'm looking for is students that come from some medical background and would like to get involved in clinical trials and getting this technology to clinical trials. So if you have some medical background and interested in robotics and technology and AI, this could be a good fit. Thank you. Great.